Alrighty, so welcome to the League Bootcamp Jungle Tier List. This is for patch 4.14. Just a heads up, so this is a tier list, which means it's going to be opinionated. It's a balance from our opinion on both solo queue and competitive level. There is room for debate on a couple of things, like placement of a couple of champs, but it is, I guess, an educated opinion when it comes down to it. I am willing to talk to anyone that has any queries about it after the presentation is done, though, so feel free to message me through the Facebook group or whatever. Alright, this is just a quick overview for those wanting just a brief look at the list. Pretty much splitting it up into the different tiers. Primary tier, tier 1, 1.5, 2, 3, 4. Primary tier obviously being the highest tier. This is a just general look at it if you're sort of popping in and popping out, but I'm going to go into some pretty in-depth conversation on each of these. Hold up, I'm just getting spammed for a second. Ah, sorry, I was just trying to get some feedback from other coaches. Alright. Why is it flicking through? Alright, so that was just the mid-tier list coming through then, sorry about that. Alright, I'm going to start off with the primary tier then. So, first up on the primary tier we have Kha'Zix, Lee Sin, Elise and Nunu. Anyone that's been watching the sort of competitive play will see these four champs being picked every single game at the moment. There's not too much room for... I don't know, there's not too much room for other champs in the meta at the moment, and I'm going to go into why that is. Everyone knows that I'm a massive Kha'Zix player, and they think it's biased that I'm putting Kha'Zix at the top, but just going into him specifically, the recent adaptations that have happened with Kha'Zix, in the last couple of weeks we've seen a slight buff to his Q in patch 3.13, I think it was, but people were still maxing Q on Kha'Zix. Recently the W max and W/E evolve have kind of come a little bit more prevalent on Kha'Zix. This has increased his clear time as well as sustain in the jungle. He's actually coming out of the jungle a lot healthier than he was, and leveling up faster just due to the increased clear time. Also the bonus 50% CC or 50% slow that you get off upgrading the W at either level 6 or level 11 really contributes to a team in regards to CC and poke, combined with the fact that you are an assassin so you can poke them down and then jump in. His early game skirmishing, his 1v1 is really, really good, counter jungling and that sort of thing. He can pretty much duel any champ in the game, very, very close with champs like Lee Sin. So in that sense, his skirmishing is really, really high. His ganking, if you can isolate the target, is some of the highest burst damage for a jungler. His mobility, obviously he can jump, he has slows, so he's very safe, yeah, in that sense. I just think that his ability to scale into the late game as well, knowing that you can evolve either W, Q or E based on the momentum of the game. If you start snowballing, you know, you might go E into Q in order to have that extra isolate damage, be able to take your dragons earlier, your barons earlier. If you're not snowballing, you can go for W, which is a safer option. That way there you can wave clear, hold out longer, provide CC for your team. You don't need that extra damage and stuff, so that's why I've placed Kha'Zix at the top of the primary list. he is definitely coming more and more into play, and that was due to slight nerfs to all of the junglers like Elise and Lee Sin recently, who they were the biggest threats to Kha'Zix just due to their early game pressure, and you couldn't isolate Elise due to her spiderlings. Anyway, I'm going to move on. So next up we have Lee Sin. This guy gets hit nerf after nerf after nerf, and just survives every time, and I guess it's the main reason is due to his early game damage. He's pretty much unmatched in regards to early game skirmishes. Has the highest mobility for any jungler in a skirmish. He can Q onto you. You can war jump, obviously. His displacement of his kick, so his ganks are very, very effective. His counter jungling is very effective. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows why Lee Sin's at the top of this list, really. It's no wonder that he is still there, but the recent hit to him in the last patch, where they reduced the attack speed slow on his E, has kind of crippled his late game even more. No pun intended. Has crippled his late game more than it was before, just for the fact that it's a hyper carry, AD carry meta, and attack speed slow is really, really, really crucial in that. But at the moment, early game pressure is what dominates in the jungle. It's like early to mid game junglers that are really, really shining at the moment. It's been this way all season. So this is why you're seeing people like Kha'Zix, Elise, and Lee Sin at the top of this list. His objective control, obviously very, very good as well. Objective control is huge with the buffs to Dragon a few patches ago, being worth more gold earlier, putting emphasis around that. His execution damage on that as well as sustain is really, really, really good as well. That's the same with Kha'Zix and Elise and Nunu. All four of them can pretty much solo Dragon and certainly steal it from another team if they don't have good execute damage like those four junglers do. Oops, skipping over. Over to Elise. Elise is in a similar space as Lee Sin. She's been hit by a couple of nerfs. One was an indirect nerf, and that was the nerf to the Ancient Golem, in which they removed the bonus damage from spells, the tenacity. Also, you have to buy more health on it for it to be as cost effective as before. So, in that sense, that was an indirect nerf to her. She still shines through, obviously, due to the Spectral Wraith build is really, really strong into either Sightstone or full tank, and or if you're snowballing, you can build Magic Pen. Her kit is very, very similar. Huge objective control. Just really, really good mobility and gank potential. Her 1v1 dueling is great. It's a pretty common theme among these top tier junglers, but Nunu, who I'm moving on to next, is kind of there for a little bit of a different reason, and he's a really, really interesting one, which a couple of people have asked me why I put in top tier, and I'm going to go into a little bit of depth about him now. So, Nunu. Everyone questions this one. Why is Nunu there? Nunu isn't that good. Like, Nunu can't 1v1 people and stuff, and this is due to the meta swing that's happened in recent times. Nerfs to Elise, Kha'Zix, Lee Sin, their dueling potential in the early game has dropped a little bit, which makes Nunu slightly safer to be able to skirmish in the jungle. Obviously, he is king of objective control. Like, no one can outsmite Nunu. He can go into your jungle, take your wraiths, take your red, whatever. So his early game pressure and objective control in that sense is still as high as ever, and it's safer now just due to the nerfs that have come in that sense to these other junglers. Also, what I was talking about with meta shift is those hyper carry AD carries that are so prevalent at the moment. We're talking Tristana, Kog'Maw, all these auto attack right click based champions in general, rather than your AD casters like Graves and Ezreal. They're shining through at the moment, and Nunu's Blood Boil in the late game gives him insane scaling, like in a team comp, just because he's going to boost your AD carries effectiveness by not only the 30% attack speed plus, but the mobility that he ends up giving them is just insane. The extra sort of 16 move speed, 16% move speed. On top of that, 80% AoE slow for up to 5 seconds, 3 seconds of channel, 2 seconds afterwards. Snowballs, like the peel and kit that he provides in the current meta, as well as the objective control and early game pressure, is absolutely perfect right now, and he is definitely shining through, which is why we're seeing him picked up more and more and more in competitive play, and I'm not surprised about that. In solo queue, he is a little bit harder to deal with, carry with in a sense, but I still rate him really high because of the points that I've pretty much said, where you can indirectly carry a team through his utility. Okay, so that finishes up on my primary tier, the 4 strongest and sort of first pick junglers in my opinion. But that's not to say that these other junglers will not work, but the 4 strongest here are strongest in my opinion for just that early game pressure and mobility that they have. Alright, so quick overview of tier 1. These are junglers which we've seen, you know, you see on occasion in professional play. You see them quite a bit in solo queue, popping up every now and again, and they've all got sort of similar kits to them, and we'll go into a bit of depth on these guys now. So starting off with Nocturne. Nocturne was top tier for a little bit with the Feral Flare changes. The Feral Flare nerfs, however, like a few months ago, kind of knocked him back a little bit. He's come back up sort of high tier 1 now, just in the sense that he's able to dive into the backline and get onto these AD carries, the hyper carries that are immobile, like Kog'Maw and stuff especially. Pair that up with a Orianna or a Lulu and you can really get onto these AD carries, get past that Nunu wall that I'm talking about. He's scales pretty decently into the late game. The hyper late game he kind of just gets peeled off and crushed by a fed AD carry though. The only things about him are his lack of objective control, in a sense where he doesn't have an execute and doesn't really have percentage health damage or anything of the sort to make sure that his jungling route is safe. His clear time is very quick though, so he can get high levels, he can, you know, get a lot of income and fed that easily, I guess. But dragons, red buffs, blue buffs, very vulnerable from some of the other junglers. So in that sense, as well as his pre-6 ganking is pretty shocking. I've scaled him, like his ganks post-6, especially on mid lane and bot lane, are really good. But the around levels 3 to 7 is really what can snowball a game. Getting those early game kills, the item advantage, blowing those summoners and securing dragons around that time is what's the most important thing, I think, in the moment, and he kind of just doesn't quite make primary tier for those reasons. Moving on, Evelynn. Evelynn has a passive which gives her global pressure. No matter where you think she is, she could be sitting in your lane, sneak past your wards. It demands a whole lot of communication both in solo queue and ranked 5s for you to be able to play against an Evelynn effectively, so for that reason she's pretty much always going to stay on the top tier, no matter how many nerfs she gets hit with. I mean, to a reasonable point, of course, but she got hit recently with base damages, which slowed up her jungle route. She was one of the fastest early jungle clearers in the game before, hitting level 3 and being able to gank you pretty much around the 3-minute mark, which is 10 to 15 seconds earlier than your usual jungle route does. She's been hit and kind of moderated with the other one, so she's about as fast as your Lee Sin and Elise and stuff now. But she scales better into the late game if you build damage, so she can still